Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and welcome to take 7 of the Simon Says Stamp Beautiful Flowers stamp set. I have people always ask, they're like, what does take 5 mean? What does take 2 mean? I'm just saying, you have take 1, take 2, take 3 when you're kind of repeating yourself. And this is literally the 7th video I've done using this stamp set because it is, as of right now, my all-time favorite. And I can't seem to not choose this one all the time. So I am the host this week for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. And it is a rather different color combo. And in my head, I wanted to use my Oxide inks and wasn't in the mood to do any watercoloring with them because that's kind of usually my go-tos. I'll do a little bit of messy watercolor. So what I did instead was I stamped this image onto some Simon Says Stamp 120 pound smooth white cardstock, which is regular smooth cardstock. I'm really liking how this particular brand takes ink. I've been finding I can get really nice blending results. If you do struggle with ink blending, another good option is Bristol Smooth, which I've done a lot of videos on and I use that one a lot. But this one, I'm really liking this one. It doesn't have that same coating that Bristol Smooth has. So it's different and yet it's really, really nice. So I white heat embossed that large floral image on that cardstock. And then I have Rusty Hinge, Hickory Smoke, and Wilted Violet Oxide inks. And my Ranger Mini Ink blending tools. I'm not using my blending brushes like I've been using in the last however many videos. I like my blending brushes when I'm trying to do like smoother blends or, that gorgeous fade out to white that I always struggle with. With this, I'm just pretty much applying solid color and I really like my ink blending tools for this. I did a video quite some time ago showing how I store all my blending foams. I do not wash my foams. There's a huge difference between this and the brushes. The brushes I always, wipe off on a microfiber cloth between colors. The foams, I don't wash. I don't wash them. I don't wipe the color off. The foams work better when they are saturated with ink, whether it be Oxide ink or regular distress ink. I don't mix the foams between types of ink, so I literally keep foams specifically for my oxides in these specific colors. I keep foams for my distress inks. Just hoping, just in case, because I know not everyone watches every single video with all my random bits of advice. So that's what I do. So I started in the middle just because I find that easier depending on what I'm doing. But with this, since I'm applying 3 colors, it made sense to start in the middle. So I used Hickory Smoke in the middle and I'm working on my glass media matte. I actually have the white non-stick matte on purposely just off to the side because that's just helping where the glare is from the lights in my office. So it's unnecessary for that part, but that's just helping with the glare. But I really like my glass matte for blending inks. It's hard to explain, but when you do it, it makes a difference. So I pulled all those colors in. They blended like a dream on this cardstock. The oxides also just blend so nicely. And then when I was done blending, I'm just using a dry tissue here. It's not a baby wipe. It's literally just a dry tissue. A cloth would work too. And I just wipe that over the white heat embossing because that removes any little bits of excess ink that are kind of clinging to the heat embossed parts of the image. And then, it makes it look more white again. So after I did that, I did splatter, this is just clean water in a paintbrush. I did a bit of splattering with this. I will say if you want more of a splatter effect or that awesome oxide effect you get with water, you need to use watercolor paper, especially Ranger's watercolor paper. That's where you get that fabulous result with, ink splatter and all that fun stuff. With this, because it's just regular cardstock, I didn't get quite the same results that I was wanting. Because the ink, the water doesn't have a chance to, move the color around and all that stuff because it's just regular cardstock. But I did my little bit of splatter. It gave it a little bit. You can see it in real life, the little splatters and whatnot. But of course, I want to intensify that. So I pulled out my splat box just to keep myself from getting, paint absolutely everywhere. And I'm just using Picket Fence Distress paint. I've shown the black soot paint. I use that one a lot when I want black splatter. The white is similar in the fact that distress paints are permanent. So just again, FYI, clean your brush immediately after using distress paints. Otherwise, it will harden on your brush and it's going to ruin the brush. So I did my little bit of splatter. I didn't water down the paint at all. I just did a splatter with my brush and then set that aside to let it completely dry. Because that's another thing I've just had to learn the hard way over the years, is I have smeared so many projects because I don't let things dry enough, and then, you know, you touch them and it smears. So I set that aside to dry, and then I pulled out this oldie but goodie, and I used it in my last video as well, the Simon Says Stamp Painted Friend Wafer Die, because it's just an all-time favorite. Just like the stamp set's a favorite, this wafer die is also a favorite. And I die cut it 3 times from the same 120-pound white cardstock. Stacked all 3 layers together with Simon's Craft Tacky Glue to get that depth and dimension that I absolutely love. And once I had that stacked, I grabbed a scrap of gray cardstock. This is smoke cardstock. And I am going to white heat emboss the sentiments I want to use with this. So this first sentiment is from the same Beautiful Flowers set, because that's another reason why I love this set, because there's, you know, all that mix of different sentiments, you know, just packed right in there. So this one I'm going to white heat emboss, and then after I heat emboss that, I'm also going to pull another sentiment from the Big Thanks Words stamp set. This is another old favorite of mine. And I'm going to stamp and heat emboss that as well onto this cardstock. So I stamped and heat embossed the first sentiment, and then I'm going to get that second sentiment lined up on my little acrylic block here. And I'm going to stamp and heat emboss this in the exact same way. So anti-static powder tool, ink up the stamp with clear embossing ink, stamp it, coat it with the detail white embossing powder, heat emboss it. And then once I've got both of these heat embossed on here, I'm going to die cut both of them with dies from the other favorite, my sentiment labels, wafer dies. So I'm going to tape those wafer dies into place and then just run those through my little sidekick. These dies are actually technically slightly too long for the sidekick plates, but they still work. I just run them through regardless, and the little ends that don't cut, I don't really care. So I die cut all of that. My background is completely dry. The splatter's dry. I tested it, made sure that I wasn't going to smear it when I did this. And then I'm just trimming it down a little bit smaller than my A2 card front. So I'm going to trim this down with my paper trimmer, and then I'm going to use my paper trimmer to also trim down those little sentiment strips just to get the ends cut off on a nice straight edge. So once I have those trimmed down, I can start kind of assembling my card. So I pulled out my stamp platform again because I wanted to stamp that big cluster of flowers on the inside of my card as well. So I relined this up onto the inside of my card base, and I'm going to ink up this stamp with that same Hickory Smoke Oxide ink. So ink that up, stamp that onto the inside of the card. And then once I got that stamped, I'm going to use one of the font, or the scripty font, Thanks, from the Big Thanks Words. So I'm going to get the flower stamped, and then I'm going to line up that Thanks stamp, and I'm going to ink that up with the Wilted Violet Oxide ink. So once I've got that stamped, I can then adhere that little sentiment strip that I had heat embossed earlier. And a part of me was like, I need to bring in the orange on the inside as well, because, you know, I used it on the front of the card. It's part of the color challenge, and it was kind of bothering me. But then I end up actually just adding an orange envelope to the mix just to, you know, tie it all together. So that was fine, keeping the inside with just the gray and the purple. So I've got everything stamped. I adhered that sentiment. I made sure the ink was dry, because oxides do take a little bit longer to dry when you stamp them. And then I adhered my front card panel with foam tape. Once that's adhered in place, I can adhere my sentiments with the Craft Tacky Glue. And since I didn't do any watercoloring, like, this card just really came together quite easily because it's just some ink blending. I wanted to add some bling. So I went rather heavy-handed this time with the bling. This is the Studio Caudia Iridescent Clear Crystals. And I started off a little more conservative, in my mind anyway. Just adding a few, but then I really liked how these looked. Like, they're not super blingy, like they're not, you know, very distracting and super sparkly or anything like that. I really like how they just kind of went with everything. So then I just put them all over the card. Just really sprinkled them all over the place. Just added a whole bunch of them and just adhered them into place with that Craft Tacky Glue. And then once I did that, off camera, I ended up white heat embossing the image onto a shimmery orange envelope to tie this all together, and that finished off my card. So as always, there'll be a link below the video to my blog post. There'll be links to all the supplies used, a link to the color challenge. You can check that out below if you were interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.